hakariki, kura hakariki, tuku a mai ki a piri, tuku a mai ki a tata, hakareke mai hirunga I te waipai, koto ahau mai ka whiti. Tara mai, tara mai, kura hakariki, kura hakariki, tuku a mai ki a piri, tuku a mai ki a tata, hakareke mai hirunga I te waipai, koto ahau mai ka whiti. Katanuku, 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 te tihi o te maunga tarawere katanuku. Te taira, e pare ana te tai ki hea, e pare ana te tai ki te kauheke, kaumātua, ki hea Māori-Ōuru. I te tīmatanga ko te kupu te tīmatanga. No reira rungi te aroha o te kupu nei, I whakatū ai tēnei rangi, tēnei ka mihi kōna ki o kōtau, ngā manuhiri, haere mai, ai haere mai da. Kana hoa i tōku tau mata ki ngōmata, ka te tiro whakararo rā ki te mana nui a kahumata momo e kare ana. Tū kei wainga te motu tapu a tini rau, ko ki whakawhiti mai ki konei ki te pērā atanga roa, te hiwi o te koutu, anei rā ki raro nei ōru kei waho, tū ai te whare tupune e tuake nei a tama te kapua e mihi nei ki o kōtau. Haere mai, a haere mai, a haere mai da. Haere mai rā I rungi te reo karanga o tara. Haere mai rā, whakatau mai rā I rungi te reo, o te reo puihanga tēnei, o tō tātou nei, ngā ringa tuhi. Ngā ringa raupā, pērā koutou te amorangi ki mua, te hāpai o ki muri. No reire I rungi wera kaupapa ki a koutou katoa, a haere mai, a haere mai, a haere mai rā. Haere mai rā ki te wiki I ngā rangi, ka haere mai nei I raro I tā koutou kaupapa, ana ko te mea nui ki te whakanui. Pērā anō I wainganui a koutou, ana whakanui te kaupapa, whakanui ngā tangata I ngā kaituhi, whakanui tērā ki a rātou o whānau e āwhina nei I a koe I tō mahi toi a tō whakaaro rangatira. No reire I rungi I tērā whakaaro a tēnei ka mihi matakui ki a koutou katoa. No reire I rungi wera kaupapa, a haere mai, a haere mai, a haere mai. A tuku ati te mihi ki a koutou, e te rangatira, me rāwari, kōrua tahi koutou rā, ka tai mai, tēnei te mihi kōna ki a koutou. Te rā anō, e Stephen, tēnei ka mihi kōna ki a koe, ana ki a tutuki pai ai tēnei kaupapa te kanohi, te manukura o te taone nei, kōrua ko tēnei, e noho ake nei ki mua a rauri tēnei ka mihi kōna ki a kōrua. Pērā anō ki tēnei taha, ana a horo waiwai, ana te kanohi o te kaunihera ki a koutou, me ki a tutuki pai ai, ia taha I raro I tēnei te whakahawa pakai. No reira mihi kōna ki a koutou, a pērā anō, ana ki a koe māpoha koutou ngā whae e whakahaere nei, te tira, o te kaupapa nei tēnei ka mihi kōna ki a koutou. E hara te roga te kaupapa, engari, tēnei ka mihi kōna ki a koutou. Mai ki runga, mai ki raro, mai ki waho rā, a rātou ko whetūrangitia, ki a tutuki pai ai tērā taha, a hoki mai ki roto nei ki a tata. No reira, mai tēnei taha, mai Ngāti Whakau e Ngāti Tono Hopu, te aroa whānui e noho ake nei mōhio nei au, ka kahui ai tātou anō, ki Ngāti Rangiwewi, anei te kanohi nei e noho ake nei. No reira, tēnei ka mihi kōna ki a koutou. No reira, haere mai rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou koutou.
Te atua mai te kore, ka mō wai kōtou, piri o te rewa e tūtei, ana rā te kau I ka tarange I te mātara.
E noho ui nai, hei reira e noho ana tamara I pāri te toko o te rangi whakawhiti o te rā, whakai o whenua e.
tāmi ki makaura, a kai te rori haramai ana tēnei wā. Nā, kei rungi a tātou katoa te āruata. E kore e tai a tātou te karo, koe ko te wāhi ki a tātou, e tuku i ngā roi mata. E tangi, ka kia koe te wāhi ki aitua. A reira apiti hono tātai hono, ko te tai o te pō, ki a tātou ngama. Apiti hono tātai hono, ko te tai o te awatea ki a tātou ko hautia mai nei i te ahiaki nei. Mihi ana, kia koe Monty, whakakanohi nei, nā hunga tuku pūtea mai. Koutou, te timatanga, wea, iti nei, ngei, nā wera, wāhua, piki haere ki te kaumā whā. Nā re mihi ana, nei te mea, ka ea, te kupu koro, mā te hururu te manu, ka re. I otori ngā wānanga, ka puta te whakaro te kaue mai te kaupapa ki runga marae. I konei, ka re, morai tuatu, te pare mātou te aro, nei re kamihi atu, Papa-i-Ōuru. A kaoti mai no, te pō o te rārua. Koe no, ke a horo waiwai mā, te kaupapa hāpopo. Ko ngā kaupapa, ko te whakanui i te kai tui tuatahi o te aro, ki au nei. O i mai hi karangi kai. Ka rua, kia rongo i te tirohanga a tētai tangata, i ruku ohunu ai ki roto i ngā kōrero kapito. Krishunita ana tēra. Tana tirohanga ki te au he rereke, ki te nui o tātai. Whakapono pū tērā tangata ki ngā atu. Ana ka mutu, ka oti i tētai tangata he hunaonga te amaki rangi i wewe, ka moeo ka moe i tētai o ngā o te whānu hahuna. Mānei koro o tēnei mea ko te hopu reo ka tuitui. O reira, ko te hea, ko te tumana ko ne, ka riro mā ngā iwi kāinga e kinaki ia wāhanga o te pō. Ki te wei, e makoto e whiri. Mā reira pē e Māori ai tēnei wiki. Mā koutou e whakatauira hia, kei runga ia koutou te mahi taumaha ngā kirangi ko te korongo te ngākau, ko te huri kahawai o te hunga o ngā ringa tuitui ki te kaupapa. Hei te pōne ka rongo tātou i tētai kei te taumata, e ngā wea, e ne ngā mi, o whakai mai, e kōrero mai. I te nui o ngā puka i tuhia e koe. Ka mutu, ka oti i te pōtu rāhurei, i te hunga tui puka hau. Ngā kōtero no make tu, o no konei hoki, ngā birds, turia, puka, i te reo Māori. Nā rere, koe nā te nui, koe nā te roa o te kaupapa. Ko te tumanako, ka mutu ka haria hoki ki roto i ngā kura. Ko te tumanako, ka mutu, ka whai wā ki te alo matuai. Kia whakatau ai ane, ka haere tunu te kaupapa, kaora nei, he taima ko tahi noi mo. Mō muri aki tēra. Engari, e mihi ana ki a tātou. Koe a tēnei ko te tau, ima te kau. I tūo ai te matatini tuatai ki roto o te aro. Ko te kau mātahi te rā, poutu te rangi te marama, te puia te wahi. Koe no, i rungi te mahi a tāwhiri mate, i huru koe ki roto i te whare rehia, the post row. Tū ai ki reira, te kapaka. Rima te kautau. Nena ka. Ka haere, ka kawe tonu tēnei kaupapa mo te rima te kautau, ka haere ko te naka. O reira ngā rungi i tērā whakaro, tērā moe a, ka mihi ānui ki a koutou, te a tātou, koutou mai, i te ahi nei, tēnā koutou, ki ora hui tātou.
te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi Māori e tātou e.
Ore ka hoki no ke rā, kōro. Mihi mai, karanga mai ki te kaupapa. Ara, wea tēnei ko te wā e tūwhera hi ai, kia timatai ngā mahi. Me te tūmanako ka whai hua. Ka whai hua. I roto, ko te wawata nui, ki te tū mai tete o ngā tamariki, hei ngā tau kei te tū mai ne, me te ki, i haere au ki te whakarongo ki tete kai tui tui. I reia kau. Ka tupu mai te hia hia, kia tū au hei kai tui, koe rā te wawata nui, kia e nā koutou, te ora hui hui tāte kata.
Kia koutou.
Ai rungi ngā tini āhuatanga o tēnei wā, e rongo mātou. Ngā tini āhuatanga o te matatini o te puia. E puia, kei muri i apu, o bāti tērā. Ngā tini āhuatanga o te matariki, kei mui a tātou, te kaupapa rā. Ngā tini āhuatanga o tēnei wā, te karanga o te rā, ara ki au koutou ko tai tinana mai nei, a ngā kaitito, ngā kai tui tui, ngā ringa tui tui, ki rungi a te Papa-i-Ōuru, nā mō hara mai, whakatau mai i rungi te karanga o te rā. Ai ka tika te kōrero a rangiti e noho ake nei te rangitirana. Ka tika ki te maumahara rātou ko whetū rangitia, ngā tini mate kai rungi a tātou. I rungi ngā tini āhuatanga o te rāua, ara hoki o ka mahara, ki te pahu, ki te hu o Tarawera, i te praere, i te rā te praere, i pahure ake. I te rā tuiki, te karanga o ngā tikea tuara, ara ko te karanga o Robin Barge, rā taumā ki a tātou, e hui o ngā kōrero pāna ki ngā tino taonga o tātou ngai Māori, o tātou e te arawa, o reira, ki a koe te whaia, nei te mihi, nei te mihi. A hoki hoki titiro ki a koe hoki māwakoha. Nui ako, nui ake, te aroha te mahana, te kite a koe, te ngā koe ki te rongo te reo, tō reo no reira, tēnei te mihi. A te kia mātou ngā reikura Stevie, a ina nahina, i hui ai tātou, te aroa nā te whakaue kei a tino hopu ki te whakanui a mātou Dame, a mātou kahurangi, a Ruia Morrison i tērā. Ngā tini āhuatanga o tēnei wā. Tai atu ki te karanga, ki te karanga o te rānei, ki a koutou ngā ringa tui tui, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai. I rungi ngā āhuatanga. A ko koutou ngā kaitui, ngā kaitito, kai tui tui. I rungi a mātou kōrero. Ara, kai konei a mātou whakapaka. Kai konei a mātou kupu, a mātou kōrero ki roto i a mātou whakaero. Ara, ki rungi i tēnei hoki, e kōrero nai ho. Kei rungi a mātou kanohi, a mātou kauai, ngā kōrero, ngā tui tui, o rātou, o ngā kōrero hitiro ka hitori, ngā kōrero tuku iho, ki a tātou. I tēnei wā tonu, kei rungi o koutou pakehiwi, ngā kōrero i roto i ngā whakapaka. Pea e tērā ki a mātou whaia, a ngā huia, a mātou tāputana, tērā ki a tata katoa. O reira, tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mahana, nā mā hara mai. Ko te mahi o tēnei rukuruku, ki te whakahoki a te mauri ki tēnei tā. O reira, tēnā koutou, Ara, tēnā tata katoa.
Aroha ki te Gloria tapu.
He wai a ke anai, te ana kuiti. Nau mai e hine kaere kaua. Ia i haia ki
Tēnā koutou, tēnā tata.
Ai, tēnā tata katoa. Kia whakoti pai ai tēnei taha okawa. I mua te hoa tutaraka kia Robin. Māku hei oti pai ai waihone te hariru. Māku I tuku te karakea kia whakoti pai ai. I mua te tainga mai a Robin ki runga nei. O reira I runga me rā kōrero. Minoi. Mai e te tupua, mai e te tawhito, mai e te kauhi ngāriki, mai te tāwhiti ngā atu. Tākina ko te mauri, toki mai a rongo kurunga marairo, rongo whare, rongo take, rongo punga, rongo mātāne, tau te mauri kēnei taura, tau te mauri kēnei tau ira. Te turu tēnā whakamaua kia tīnā.
Tīnā.
Haumi, huie.
Tai ie.
Kia ora nā. Kia koutou tērā I haere. Kia ora nā.
I would appreciate O, he te pai. Kai te rongo mai koutou I ahau. Me mau I ahau tētahi kupu. Kai te pai? Ok. Tēnā koutou. Koutou I tae a tinana mai ki tēnei pōhiri. Koutou I tae a ipurangi mai ki tēnei. Koutou kei tērā ao, tēnā koutou hoki. We very much appreciate your attendance, those of you who are here in person and those of you who are here ipurangi. So thank you very much for being here. So there are, before we listen to people who are very worthwhile to listen to, we have one or two things for us to note. Yes, I got the short straw for the health and safety briefing. Therefore, however, this is a serious matter. I watched on Thursday morning on Māori television, what was Māori television, a formal presentation by them of the unveiling of their new name, Whakaata Māori. And as the notes of a waiata to support one of the speakers died down at the end, we heard the fire alarm. So those of us at home watching on TV watched people elegantly and with dignity vacate the room. So that is our gold standard. We will make our way during an emergency through that exit there. We will gather nicely outside where we can have a nice view of the beefy firefighters who turn up. All silliness aside, the other part of our briefing is COVID-19 lingers. We know this, and as soon as I've finished talking, I will go and get my mask from one of the many masks. We have boxes of masks. If you would like one, we have plenty. As Rangitihi alluded to in his talk, we are happy to report that we did not have to run raffles or sausage sizzles to pay for the flights and accommodation of our guests. We are therefore wanting to record our relief and our gratitude to our sponsors, which include Creative New Zealand, the Clouds Booksellers, One Foundation, Rotorua Trust, Te Arawhiti, Te Pau o Karoa, me Reorua Rotorua, Reorua, and of course, Ngāti Whakaure Education Endowment Fund. Ka nui te mihi kia koutou katoa. Well, I'm going to clap. Finally, mina ka mata ni koutou, me hai wako. Well, ladies and gentlemen, so now for the real show, I will hand to Robin and
Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou te papai. I karanga mai kia mātou, I whakatau mai a tātou. I hāpai tēnei kaupapa, te koekoinga o ngā kaituhi Māori, no reira, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou e hui mai nei tēnei rā. Tēnā koutou e noho nei. Tēnā koutou i rungi i te ipurangi nā tangata o te ao. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. Tēnā tata katoa. Full of bāja hau. And just check all these things. And on behalf of the Kupu Board and our organising committee, which sounds very grand, but it's actually only 5 of us. But we would like to thank you all for coming today and also for supporting our Kupu Festival. It's my honour and privilege to open this Kupu Festival of Māori Writers. The festival starts today and ends next Saturday. It's a celebration of Māori writers, past, present and future. As Mangitihi has alluded to, for the future we're going to be inspiring students each day when a Māori writer will visit Rotorua schools, kura kaupapa in the mornings and secondary schools in the afternoon. And I don't know about you, but in my time at school I don't think I ever met a Māori writer. This is an opportunity for our students to meet Māori writers, to actually meet one, to see one, to talk with them about books and writing. And hopefully some students will be inspired to take up writing, either in Te Reo Māori or in English. That is our goal, and we're hoping to inspire those students. As you know, we have a rich Māori literature, a traditional literature that we can draw on, and our past writers are being celebrated this week on Monday, Wednesday and Friday evenings, with events being held at 3 marae. Tarimano tomorrow night, Te Pākira on Wednesday night, and Te Tākinga on Friday night. Our literary traditions and writing in Te Reo Māori will be celebrated here on Tuesday evening, when we have a session here at Tangata Kapua on composing and performing ngā motiatia. Then on Thursday evening and all day on Saturday, there will be events at the Rotorua Public Library, the Arts Village and McLeod's Bookstall, celebrating about 30 Māori writers. These include Patricia Grace and Whiti Heraka, who has just won the Auckland New Zealand Book Awards for fiction. All in all, this Kupu Festival is a great celebration of Māori writers and their works, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm now going to introduce our next speaker, who needs little introduction. I did a Google search on her, and the first entry that comes up describes her as a New Zealand writer. She has university degrees in English and art history, and a PhD in psychology. She is a renowned national and international speaker and scholar. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a New Zealand writer and emeritus professor from Ōhinemutu. Ngā huia te awa.
Takuturanga ake, kei roto I te whare, katuatura ki te o te aroha aue, he aue. Katuatura ki te o te aroha aue. E raranga tira mā tēnā rā koutou, ko mihi a ngā mihi, ko poroporo akingia ngā poroporo aki ki a rātou ki. Nō reira, tēnā anō tātou katoa. E hurea hau ki te reo o tauiwi, because we've only got 25 minutes. And I didn't really know where to begin, but I'd like the first slide, please. This is a celebration of Māori writing. It is way overdue, and I congratulate the organisers for their efforts and for bringing it here, for having it happen here in Tamate Kapua in Rotorua Nui Akapu, because we are a community of storytellers. So I thank Robin, Mākoha, Rangitihi, whom I have yelled at about it. I thank all of you. It's an honour to be invited as your first speaker. Last week, I helped launch a book by Manu Kahienade. It is called He Whenua Rangatira, and it talks about mana I te whenua. Not mana whenua, but mana I te whenua. And how an understanding of that energy is what drives you to create, to analyse, to argue, and to make statements of power and of meaning. So we're in this house, next slide. We're in this house, which is very much about mana I te whenua, mana I te wairua, mana I ngā tūpuna. This house, every single panel, every single line constructs a narrative and tells us about people whom we have lost and about people who are yet to come. I've been described as a New Zealand writer, and that makes my little heart kind of weep a bit. But I thought I'd read you some things and then comment on them. And this is part of a story I wrote some time ago. I met with Robin the other day, and she suggested I read one which reminded her of her auntie. I thought, oh, and then she found another poem and said, that sounds like my Uncle Ted Ruhi. And I said, yes it is. And we both laughed. So I'm wondering, should I read Uncle Ted Ruhi, or should I do something completely different? And then I thought, let's throw some politics into it. And so this is from my story, Sunday Drive, which was published in a collection many years ago in the 1980s, but I've reproduced in this book, Tahuri, a limited edition. They'd reached a dead end. They stopped in a cul-de-sac. Auntie Jessie turned the key off, gave it a rest. Dense greenery leaned across the road, threatened the puffing, tired old car. Huge tall hedges of spongy branches that Tahuri knew was full of walking sticks stretched around them. She was safe in the back seat. She noticed her mother and auntie were leaning close together, and Auntie Jessie had her lacy handkerchief out. She was sniffing. Tahuri looked out the window, adult stuff. Hidden by the walking stick hedge was a grand polished gate with shiny bolts and studs. It was shut very tight and was as high as a big man. The hedge went over the top of it like an arch. Further along, there was another gap in the woolly green growth. Tahuri couldn't see what was there, but the front of a gleaming black car poked out, just a little bit, and she saw a beautiful silver cat form, tiny and graceful, on top of the bonnet of the car. She heard her mother's voice. Jaguar. He's got a Jaguar. That's why you brought us here. There was chilling anger beneath her words, and there was pain roiling beneath Auntie Jessie's sniffles. When will you learn, Jessie girl? When will you ever bloody learn? This isn't for the likes of us. It's not. He's not for the likes of you. Him, a doctor with his Jaguar car and his big flash house and his poncy lawyer wife and the fancy bloody ideas. He's using you, girl, using you, that aha. Can't you see that? Can't you see that? And now, us, coming up here in this clapped out old bomb, looking at the flash Pākehā homes, you say. admiring what we will never have. When will you ever bloody learn? Jessie sniffed and neatly tucked the hanky under the turned-over cuff of her pink cardigan. She restarted the car. I'm learning, she said. That was 1982, and it's a tribute to my mother and also to an aunt whom I will not name. Anyway, I do have a plan to my talk. I grew up with storytellers, every Māori in this village, and I grew up in this village. Every one of us was surrounded by stories. This house, the other 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses, are full of extraordinary tales and adventures and romances and broken hearts and unrequited passions. You look around Ōhinemutu and what do you see? As well as that, I was privileged to be brought up in a family of weavers, of carvers, of tour guides, tourist guides, and the outstanding one, the one that shaped me most, was my kuia, Hera Rogers, as well as her best friend, Kuia Kiddo, and also many other aunties who nurtured in me a passion for stories. They were always telling stories, and my grandmother, Hera, was always weaving stories with fibre and with words. In this community, we loved words, chanted, recited, sung, droned, orated. Words were all around us. In this community, we grew on powerful stories. And I was very lucky because I was the kind of kid that sat there, ears stretched, and I listened. I listened and I drank in every word. I was also extremely privileged to have an auntie who was part of the post-war Māori school teaching program in which lots of talented girls and men from the private schools were recruited into the service. This auntie was Tōria Tāwhai, otherwise known as Lydia O'Leary. She sometimes stayed with us, Auntie Tōria. She was a truly awesome and experimental teacher, and she had me reading and writing at 4 years old. I was her first experiment. The other guinea pig came along, her daughter Miro, who was writing and reading at 3. So it could be done. I owe her a lot, although I grew up in a relatively bookless house. My whaiatawhai, my beloved adopted mother, the daughter of Hera Rogers, was quite suspicious of the written word, but oh, she loved a good story. And writing was my happy place. It really was, because at home life was pretty unsettled, and most of the houses in Ōhinemutu were relatively unsettled, but ours was especially so, and I tended to escape a lot, and my principal and most valued avenue of escape was writing. Writing was my happy place. I won a National Essay Prize, third slide please, when I was 11 as a writer, and I got another one at 14. And this is me at 14 on the pai of this house, 1963. And these are words I wrote in 1963. Vital knowledge must be recorded. I was so earnest. The arresting of a disappearing culture. Preserving that which is difficult to preserve, the sacred knowledge that only a Māori can understand. This is me at 14. as I live in a famous Māori pā. It is my life, and one can write one's life easily. This is not quite the beginning. I started much sooner and was published when I was 7 or 8. But the urge, the hunger, the thirst, the passion was always there. What I always did as well, and this is important for those of you that are emerging or aspiring or that want to be a writer, is to understand and recognise what I call your resources. And for me, even as a little child, the most important one was other people. You sit and you watch carefully. You don't have to lurk and be furtive and sneaky, but just sit quietly and watch. And in that way, you're gathering all the information that you need. Or maybe not quite all of it, because there is another source which I think is essential in the crafting of a good story, or the writing of a good journal article, or the production of a good book. You have to read what other people write. You must. Every good writer is an omnivorous reader. We can't live without each other. We cannot. So you must read. And we live now in a time of real privilege because there's Kindle. And as someone that travelled a lot, I used to have this bag full of books and I cart it around with me. And some of them were huge, you know, James Joyce's Ulysses, my God. Kate Millett, all sorts of books. The old-time Māori, and they were big, heavy books. Now you can get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 books into something not much bigger than an old penguin novel. Mind you, you do have to pay. So writing was my happy place. And part of that happy place was actually reflecting on what I saw and what I did. So I'll read you a poem now. I've got to say something else. I'm a kind of multi-genre writer. At the moment I'm actually writing the script for a documentary TV series, which is absolutely crucifying me. It is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, to get my creative, stretching, expansive thoughts into 57 seconds. And I look at Tim Worrell, and I look at Heteri Mita, and I think of Merata, and I think, oh my God, Taika Waititi, please note Te Arawa. And I actually think, how did you guys do it? How did you do it? Anyway, this next poem is one that's really dated, or the date's in it, but it's one that I used to think about a lot when I was away from home, and it's in a lot of overseas collections as well as local ones. I've got to stop fiddling with that. Looking at time, I don't want Cousin Bootsy standing at the door. The other thing is that my writing is published under 5 different names. I've got to say that. So the really, really early stuff, like the 1950s and 60s, is under a peculiar name. And then the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s is under another weird name, and then I discovered my actual name, and I've got to say this because it's so mad. I wrote it in the byline of a collection of poems published overseas. My actual name is Ngāhuia Tahuri o Te Arawa. That's the full name. Which is why this is called Tahuri. But my namesake, who was the matriarch of the Nudic family, was called Tahuri, although she was Ngāhuia Tahuri o Te Arawa. And so there's actually poems out in the world written by that person. And naming is important, and I'm working on a project at the moment, and with a very big international, and they said to me, can we do something about your name? I said, no way. No. So here we go. This is a poem about place. So wild blows the wind, cold, and here I sit against a tree, emblem of life, green, growing silent upon this hill that was the realm, the fortress of Te Makawe, feared and avoided. That road before me stretches far into the cool twilight, like tar which melts beneath the hot sun. Cars, modern, streamlined, vintage, how they move upon a road that once knew only the tread of tough brown feet, and heard the power of the haka, the plaintive wail of the tangi, a call, a challenge, karanga, echo across our warm marae. Still, he has come, that white man, has come and has conquered, wiped from beneath us a base we knew so well, so that it should exist no more, but be replaced, our glorious heritage, with muskets, fire and bricks, with industry, with progress, with 1966. So that was Pōhiri Kupu. Coming now to actual becoming a writer, because Robin and I had this big meeting, and she said, people want to know how you got where you've arrived. And so people ask, who influenced you? And I pay homage to the guides, to those storytellers, absolutely premier weavers of imagery, of magic. As well as them, of course, there were the women who composed instantly karanga like you would never believe. There were the whai kōrero experts, whose voices still resonate in this house. There were people like that who really influenced my passion and my need to achieve excellence with words. But there were other people too. And Rotorua was somewhat charmed to have, as our deputy librarian, an extraordinary woman named Fiona Kidman. And she worked in what is now transforming itself into the Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre. She was there with Mrs. Thompson, and they were really receptive and loving and responsive to Māori kids. It was an amazing library. And so I met the lovely Fiona, and she constantly encouraged me. Someone else that came into my life was Hone Tūwhare. And he was a close friend of Elizabeth Heapy Te Heruheru. who was a close friend of my Auntie Dot and my Uncle Dudley. And this was a couple in Ōhinemutu, obviously mixed heritage, who were incredibly sophisticated, and they had soirees, which were attended by people like Colin McCann, Toss Williston, and of course, Hone and Elizabeth. So I met Hone there, and of course went into utter paralysis, and just sat there looking at him. I couldn't say anything. And then a few months later, I was a first-year student at Auckland University, enrolled in a couple of degrees, and I met him then. And I will say that he really encouraged and nurtured me. However, as you know, last slide, I became an academic. But my first big project was about Te Arawa. By the time I started this project, I'd collected a couple of degrees. I'd thrown myself all over everything as ngā tamatoa, as gay liberation, as women's liberation. I was an angry girl. And it was very hard coming back to the path. But I wanted to. And when I did come back, particularly on the death of my kuia in 1970, I realised that her generation, the generation that went to England with Margarete Papakura, the generation that saw the Pioneer Battalion leave our land and die in Gallipoli, the generation that constructed and excelled in manaaki tangata, true tourism, they were going. The generation entrepreneurial who set up extraordinary businesses that were run exclusively by women. Those stories I turned into my PhD thesis. I talked to probably 30 of the guides, all my queers cohort, and a few of the younger ones. And I also had the privilege, as my mother particularly and her cousins were all entertainers and haka people, of reaching into the performing arts community. So my thesis is on the socio-cultural impact of tourism on Te Arawa, and it ended up, because it was in 1975, and I've got to say this, the degree was awarded to me in this house. I received my PhD on this, well, it may not have been this one, but in this house. Because it was a first, a lot of firsts, but because it was about Te Arawa. I just happened to write it. It was about the people whom I loved and who loved me back. Anyway, on the screen you're looking at what I consider my 4 favourite books. I've done 8, but these are the 4 that I really like. Most of you know Maumoko, which is also French. There's a big French version. Some of you might know Ruahine, and I will finish with a story from Ruahine. Tahure is there, that's fiction. And I also, because when I'm not a writer, I'm a curator. My passion is contemporary and traditional art. And I had the honour of being asked by the Te Kamawahete family to curate their show, the show of Rangi Mārie and Digorees, and to turn it into a book, and that is the book. But my name's not on the cover, because it's about them. It's not about me. I will finish now, though, by just saying I'm back home in the heart with my cousins. And it's a place that feeds my soul. It is. and it's a place with its own story. And so I'll finish with a short tale from Ruahine. Ruahine is interesting. It's 20 years old now, but it takes 8 or 7 women from whom I am descended. I didn't write about women outside my bloodline, and the women are ones like Mahi Ngārangi, Haumapuhia, Henemoa, of course, and various others, Wairaka and Muriwai. They're all in here, but I've retold them and given them a really controversial twist. However, I will give you a nice straight story. I had to choose it very carefully. The name of the story is Ōhinemutu. Kākara, oh, this is just the prequel, this is the background paragraph. Kākara was the daughter of Ihinga, the famous explorer from the canoe Te Arawa. She disappeared when the crew members and their families were settling around the lake shores of Rotorua and Rotoiti. Ihinga searched in vain for his daughter. He found her amputated remains by a steamy inlet below the broad looming hill, Pukeroa. Heartaching, he wept for his child. His lamentation named the inlet, and the village grew there, Ōhinemutu. So this is the story. The ones on the bow were the first to jump out onto the sand. Calloused feet hit the pebbled beach. Toes spread, dug in to haul the boat up. Hot, the sand was hot. The men watched out for each other. They had to be careful. They heard that this place was strange. They secured their canoe, dragged it high, then tramped into the scrub, one behind the other, fully alert. Ahead of them, an energetic older figure cut through their path, his voice hovering above the feathered wisps of steam. He paused, gesturing for them to move across, forming a ragged line. Damp, like clouds of breath floating in the air, curled around them. Ice darting, they continued their search. Someone cried out. They rushed over, heapful of gaping holes alive with bubbling water, of small reeking mouths of earth, of jagged gaps, belching pungent vapours at them. The old man had crumpled across a slab of pale stone, which protruded from the spindly black bushes. Small, sharp leaves nipped at the bleak sunlight. The bony, twisted branches cast a dappled shadow. The old man's mouth was open, his eyes clamped shut as if stitched together by wrinkled creases of pain. He clutched something small to his chest, pressed it there, pressed it hard, brought it to his throat, to his cheeks, to his lips, now closed, brought it to his nostrils, leaking mucus with his seeping old man tears. He breathed in, opened his aching eyes. He looked. He held his daughter's hand. Cut off. Ōhinemutu. His daughter's hand. The rest of her gone. Ōhinemutu. Nō reira, e rangatina mā kumutui nāianei. Thank you for the opportunity to share my work with you and enjoy the festival. Ngā mihi tō. Oh, and just, this is my way of supporting Free Palestine. Just in case you wondered what I was wearing. It's part of an ongoing struggle and one which we relate to. Anyway.
Conscious of time, we might have time for a couple of questions. Does anyone have any questions? I just have one question, you know, and it's just to do with voice. You know, some writers read their writing and, you know, you can understand the words, but it doesn't speak to you. Whereas when I read your Auntie Marlene, I could, you know, I could taste the black balls. I could, you know, I could remember the people from that world. And I just wondered how you know to get that right, so that people like us can relate to that.
Oh, that's a hard question. Thank you, Robin. Voice is how you do it, and how you do it comes from here. Not from here, comes from here. And there's a phrase that the old classical English writers use, which is find your true voice. And when you find that, you'll be fine. But when you lose it, you're in trouble. And so my first audience as a writer was our mother, Haparoa, who left school in Standard 3. And if she couldn't understand even my academic writing, she was the reader of my PhD, because I was writing it for the queers. If she couldn't understand it, then there was no point in doing it. So true voice is something I really hope as writers we can all catch and hold on to. But it comes from in here. It's not from here. It's not. When you do it from there, you're copying other people. Find yourself.
You're inspirational. I sat here today and I felt like a child in the classroom, inspired. your words, and I looked at that slide when you were only 14, and I'd like to just have a copy of those words because you've actually lit the fire within me again. You've rekindled the fire. I enjoy my writing, and I write poems, and I sat here encapsulated just and inspired by you, so I don't have a question other than I just stand to say thank you for reigniting. It's always there. I write and I understand you say it comes from here and not here. Because when I do my poetry, I am moved to write. I don't sit down and think I'm going to write something today. So thank you very, very much. You've been an inspiration. I wish today now that my sisters had come with me because they would have just loved you. I'm going to ask for the live stream, whatever connection, so that they can view you. Thank you very much.
And thank you for sharing that you are a writer.
Well, I just doodle. I'm a
Darling,
doodle.
no, you put it down. I mean, part of the fight is that we write, but we write in secret, or we do it and we don't think we're going to show it to anyone, but we do it and keep doing it. It's a legacy. It's a legacy. Your mokopuna will love it coming across the shoebox 40 years from now.
Anyone any last question or comment before we finish for today? Okay, well.
Nahuya, I just want to say from my heart, having had an association with you with a bit of a distance between us, I've always admired your work and knew you were building a body of work, and I had no idea actually of the depth of that work. And what I loved hearing you say today was you started to learn to read when you were 3. And I keep thinking of our own mokopuna and how do we get them to write and read and write and read, because they're so infatuated with screens. And I worry when I try to read to them, they enjoy it, but they don't read like we used to when we were little. How do we switch that and turn it around? And you must have something within that you can share for us, for our teachers and us as parents.
Thank you, Stevie. I can't know, that's somebody else's expertise. But I think that what we do is we take the tools that we've got and we flip them and we deconstruct them and we claim them, and even if our kids are glued to screens, make those screens into something that they can use to express their creativity and their pain and their journey and their visions. I was 3 and that's how I did it. I was a writer. Little kids running around at Te Koutu or at Pukero or at Orua Whatakohanga, they've got different ways of doing it. I don't think that pen and paper is the only way, actually. And I think that's what we as nanas, as grandmothers, have to accept now. Even though I feel they're missing out. There's nothing more sensuous and loving than a story read out loud or told to you. It's about what you do with time too, isn't it? And all that. But there are other people actually in the room who are much better qualified to answer that than me. Lots of grandmothers and grandmothers.
Well, I think there's no other questions. I'd just like to say thank you to Ngāpuia for sharing your stories. I think you're right, Steve, when you saw the books that she's written, you know, they're fiction, non-fiction, art, history, you know, a huge range of works. I actually looked up on Google the list of publications, and there were 10 pages of publications, so I didn't go to all of those. She's a prolific writer. But thank you, Ngahuia, for sharing your stories with us today, and just for being here, and it's so great to have you opening our Kupu Festival here at Tamataka. Now we're moving next door for Kai.
Kia ora, tātou. Thank you all. I'll just say he karakia for gold check pai ai tēnei tā, and then we'll head across. And of course, thank you to all of those who made this afternoon such a terrific experience for us. Me noi tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tō tātou ariki he praiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te piringa tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, ake, ake. Amen. Kia ora tātou.